I guess I'd never been to MegaCon. I hadn't really thought about it. A couple years ago I did. I came to MegaCon. I crashed it a bit. Greg Capullo, a good friend of mine, was at MegaCon. I was in New York. I was going to visit my daughter in Europe. I had a 10-hour layover. I said, how can I get to Orlando? And they went, yeah. So I went to Orlando, hung out with him for a couple hours, went to one of his panels, and then I flew back to JFK and then went on to Europe. So that's the only time I've been to MegaCon. It was like crashing the party. So I usually don't come with any prepared statements or whatever else. I just sort of ramble a little bit. So we're just gonna I'm gonna walk you through my life on like how it just sort of snaked into something that I had no idea about. But before we get going, I'm gonna do a couple PSAs, right? A couple PSAs. Number one, if you guys have been up seeing me signing or something, if you get up close, you're gonna see I've got a bit of a red nose, right? So I went to, I live in Phoenix, went to the doctor, they took a little thing, and then they come back and they say this word cancer, right? Not a good word. Skin cancer, though. So dodged a bit of a bullet, it's topical, but they said, don't worry about it. It's small, insignificant, we'll take care of it, whatever else. That, ladies and gentlemen, is the small, insignificant skin cancer treatment, right? So, what I'm here to say, for all you good people here in Florida, put your suntan lotion on. I was a dumbass, and I was doing a lot of coaching. I was living in Phoenix. It's 110 degrees, and I didn't put my suntan lotion on. And I talked to a couple of other people that were getting the operation at the same time, and they were telling me the horror stories of the ugly one. That's the baby version right there. So all you good-looking people, especially young people, you don't want to have scars all over the place. Put your suntan lotion on that's on there. The other one, we just recently moved. My wife and I moved to a town that's been in the news lately called Altadena. We bought the house. We're remodeling it because we could walk down the end of the street to a place called Eaton Canyon, right? There were two big fires, right? There was the one in the Palisades, and then they call it the Eaton Fire. The Eaton Fire was at the end of our block. It began at Eaton Canyon, that now they're saying they're going to shut down for 2 years. The fire, when it broke out, I went up there, and I'm telling you, ladies and gentlemen, it was Godzilla, right? If you've never seen flames that big going all the way up the hill, 80-mile-an-hour winds coming in our direction, and I could see the firefighters, because at the end, I went and checked on our house, and then I went down to the end, and I could see that the firefighters were completely outmanned. It was Godzilla, they were the little ones, 80-mile-an-hour winds, no air support. They couldn't do anything other than to get out of the way of it, right? And then the beast came, it went around, and it came down. For whatever reason, our block is in this little vortex, but it came down about 10 houses down and wiped out 9,000 houses and buildings, right? So, anyways, a little bit later on, we're going to be, in a week or two, we're going to be making an announcement. I'm going to do like a match. I'm going to put up a lot of money, and hopefully I can encourage some of my fans and some of fandom. You put in $1, I'll put in $1, and we can help some of these people. Okay, I'm new to the neighborhood, so I at some point I thought that by the time I went up there too, there's flames on all three sides. My wife and I conceded we were going to lose our house, but we were going to lose a house, right? There are people that have been living in that area for decades that lost their home, right? I had a house, right? So think about it from, like, it was already alarming from an adult level, but think about it if you had kids, right? You have to turn to your kids and say, hey, we got to evacuate, right? It's coming, you could see it, it was coming. Grab a suitcase, right? Let's go, right? Put it in the car, we got to get out. And then you come back and everything else that you were thinking of taking is gone, right? In some cases in the Palisades, people had one suitcase they could pack, they could put it into the car, and then the roads got so clogged that the guards came along and said, get out of your car and walk. In some cases, run, right? Because the flames were coming. So even your one suitcase went up in flames, right? And so now we have remnants down our street of, like, you got houses burnt to the ground. You've seen the pictures. It looks like somebody dropped the bomb. And the houses are down, and the cars are burnt, and everything else. And I keep thinking about, like, the young kids. I mean, it's harsh enough for the families, but you lose your house, you lose your community. You can't go stay at the neighbors because there's no neighbors. They got burnt too. And the kids go, I don't have a house anymore. Right? My suitcase might have got burnt. We don't have the car. I don't have a school. The school's got burnt. And they got to go, all the kids now have to go live in different houses, and so they lose their friends and their community. Everything sort of gone, right? And it's interesting how people try to put blame on it, but guys, I'm telling you, I went up to that house at half an hour after that fire started. I sent a couple pictures to people, and they go, oh my God! And I go, that's 20 minutes into it. It hasn't even burned the house yet. You just wait till it starts burning the houses. That thing became a monster, right? By 2 o'clock, it was gone. Like, it was burning at a rate, and there was nothing with 80-mile-an-hour winds. There was nothing those people could do. I don't care how much water pressure we had, there was nothing that could have been done. So everybody did as good as they could. It was just, hopefully, we won't talk about something like that for another 100 years. It'll get built back, and there's been disasters all over the country and all over the world, and people are resilient and they'll come back. The thing that will delay it is that you now have, in the area we bought, like the house we bought is 100 years old. And they built houses differently than they build them today. And so there's biohazard stuff in those houses that they don't allow you to use anymore. And when it burns, it got into the air. And so now it's going to take a long time just for them to go, the soil's safe to put a 2x4 in to start rebuilding. But anyway, those are the realities of life that come. So at some point, you're sort of thankful that you actually have some sort of fun and joy in it. So I'm gonna sort of walk you through a little bit of like how, and encourage hopefully somebody here in this audience to just sort of take your shot. Because I can tell you right now, as a 16-year-old who bought my first comic book and started to wish that I could maybe teach myself to get in the comic book, I had no idea where that path would go, right? And so this is the thing that I try to sort of tell, like, especially young kids want to break in a bit, like, just take your shot, because who knows, when opportunity knocks, and you never know, and you open up the door, you never know who's on the other side of that door, right? And sometimes you're going, wow. You want to do what? Yeah, cool, let's go. So, as you saw a picture there earlier, I get to do a panel. I'm going to be the moderator with Frank Miller. If you guys are going to come up to that panel, it's supposed to be a Daredevil one. But I'm going to guess, because I know Frank and I know me, we go back many decades, we're going to veer off course, right? Because we've got too many war stories to tell you guys, right, that have nothing to do with Daredevil. Yeah. And I'm sure once we get going, we'll be like, oh yeah, let's get back to Daredevil. And we'll be sitting there. So I look forward to seeing Frank up on stage and having a good time. But I was 16, if we look at the next one here, so this is this is some of my early stuff that I was doing when I was in my basement, literally my basement with my dad, right? There's my high school photo down there. The baseball photo down here, the guy in the leather jacket, that's my dad, right? The original Todd father, right? He's there looking like look at the coach back then. This is like in the 70s, right? Coaches were badass, right? Fucking dressed and looking like you were gonna wear leather, we're gonna look like one of those drama TV shows that used to have movie of the weeks, right? I'm the guy that's in the left with the long hair and the Goldilocks there. That was when I moved back to Calgary when I invented Spawn in my basement. But you go, cool, I thought I was going to be a baseball player, you know, that was my goal, but I go, I'll teach myself how to do a little bit of drawing. So you push the buttons, I'll catch up to you as you push the buttons here. These are samples, this is what I used to do. I don't know if you can read the words on there, like bodies and bodies. I've said it before, I would go weeks and weeks and weeks, and all I would do was certain parts of the anatomy. So these pages were ones, I do little drawings. Most of these, the reason I cut them out and pasted them, because I was doing them at school. You know, I was like doodling and getting D's, well, because I wasn't paying attention to anything, right? So I just was doodling in the corner, and then I go home and I cut up all my pages I was supposed to be doing homework, and then I put them in my books, and I try to get better and better and better and better, and we keep going. So during that time, look, we're all like to be closet collectors, right? And here's why they call it a closet collector. Because my girlfriend right here that you see, it's like you don't want to be the person who goes, yeah, to the comic book. So what you do is I have a shelf and I put it in my closet, right? You guys have one of these, and then you close it, right? And you close it, so when she comes in, she thinks you're a self-respecting person, right? And then, but I remember the one time she opened the door and she saw the stack of the comic books. They were all organized and numbered, they had little labels on them and stuff. And she's going, what's that? And look, there's only one answer at that point. They're my brothers.
Yes.
But eventually she found out they were actually mine, and she still put up with it. But here's the upside of all of it. She sort of enjoyed my flaws. Anyways, at that point I was about 17, she was 13. And I am more than ecstatic to say that we have been together for 47 years. So, yeah, not to get mushy, but I know people have had long lives and stuff. They go, Todd, man, what's this? I don't know if there's any secret. Here's what I will tell you, though, with all honesty. Loving that woman for 47 years has been as easy as breathing, right? It's been that easy. Like, what are you talking about? I wish, knowing what I've had, I wish a lot of things on many people, and having a good relationship with somebody that you love for decades, man, I wish I could sprinkle that on everybody across the world, because it's good chicken noodle for the soul. Her name is Wanda, right? A name that you may be familiar with in the comic books, right? Because the whole concept of the Spawn character I created when I was a kid came from that one, which is, let me just tell you sort of the core of the idea of Spawn, and it's basic. I don't care who you are, what your religion is, what your political beliefs are, I don't care any of that. I believe that we all have somebody that we love dearly. And if you woke up today and for whatever reason got in a fight with that person, and then as you're walking out the door you said, screw you, and you slammed the door, and you got in your car and you're heading to work or wherever you're going, and then you got broadsided by a bus and you were killed. You have to live with the fact that the last thing you said to the person that you love the most is screw you, right? That's, to me, would be crushing. I think everybody, in a blink of an eye, if somebody said, you can go back and say I love you, would take the deal. And only after you take it, because we're emotional animals, we would take the deal and then would go, who said that? And that sort of is the idea of Spawn, of he let an emotional moment get the better of him, and he forgot to read the fine print when he made the deal with the devil. And now he's been dealing with the repercussions of it ever since, right? But it came from a good spot. He just wanted to go back to his Wanda, right? I got my Wanda. I know I wouldn't want to leave this earth with a negative sort of voice to her, so that's it. So what I did was I created all these characters. Like I said, Spawn was, I did about 20, 25 of them. I was drawing like Superman, Batman, Spider-Man, all the Marvel DC stuff. But I also was creating my own character, Spawn being one of them. And then, over time, as I taught myself to draw, I also went to college, and I would send off samples. And some of you have heard hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of samples. I just sent them over and over and over and over. And so a couple of these are actually the envelopes, because I kept almost all the rejection letters I had. They were motivation for me, right? I've said before, I used to have a whole bag of rejection letters, and I'd go to shows and people would come up to me, some young aspiring artist, and go, man, I tried to break in, and I sent my samples, and I sent it to a couple of people, and they said, you know, it's not good, I don't know what to do. And I pull out that bag and I pour that stack of rejections, and I go, every one of those said stop. And I still went, and here I am, and you wanted my autograph, right? I'm telling you, you just go until you find one yes. Forget the no's. Keep going until you get one yes, that's all you need. And once you get the one yes, you're golden, right? So I kept track on those charts of who I sent it to and what they were, and eventually I got that first phone call, right? I got the first phone call from somebody at Marvel, and what had happened was I had sent some samples to Ann Nocente, who was the editor at the X-Men. She gave it to Archie Goodwin, and he was the editor at this thing called the Epic Illustrated line, who gave it to Steve Englehart, who was doing a book called Coyote, and Steve Englehart needed 10 pages in the back of his Coyote book, and it just went bam, 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 bam. I sent it to X-Men. I was never going to take over John Byrne's job, right? But it's like, I'll send it to everybody. I literally was sending it to everybody. But it came up and around, and then Steve Englehart phoned and said, hey, Todd, I've got 10 pages. You want to do this character called Scorpio Rose, right? This is like you remember these moments when the phone comes and you're going, man, I got my first job, this is it, you hit it. And I did the designs as you saw on there. Oddly, Coyote number 12, I believe, I got it right, Coyote 12 is the very first thing I ever drew in my life professionally. They liked what I drew, and they said, hey, you want to do this other story called Slash, somebody drew it, we don't like it, you want to redraw it, and here's the script. I went, yeah, sure, right, like, you're hungry, you'll do it. And then they, even though I drew Slash second, they published it first, right? So to you, my first work is Slash and Coyote number 11. For me, though, I like that Scorpio Rose story I did in 12 was the first stuff anybody ever gave me a paycheck for. This page down here is the first published page I ever had at Marvel. If you go back just a second. And I don't know, you're not going to be able to read it. A couple things are interesting here, because it says down at the bottom, and I don't know why they did it, I didn't have, it says introducing in big letters, they got my name, right? And I was like, oh man, Mom's going to be so proud, right? And they gave you like 10, 15 copies of it, and I remember I'd get my free copies, and I was at college at that point, I was still trying to finish up college, and I went up and down the street, and I was so proud, I was knocking on the doors. Hi, my name's Todd, you don't know nothing about me, and I'm sure you don't like comic books, but this is mine, right? And then I went to the next house, and I was just handing out, like flyers, essentially, these comic books that are there. The thing that's intriguing to me, if you sort of squint and you can see it, the letterer of that book is a gentleman by the name of Tom Orzechowski. And Tom Orzechowski, for those of you who haven't been paying attention, is the gentleman who has lettered all 360 issues of Spawn, right? So when fast forward, when I started the Spawn comic book, I said to myself, oh, it's my book, I get to do what I want. Who's the best letterer in the business? And to me, Tom Orzechowski, who was doing the X-Men, was the best letterer in the business by far. So I went, hey Tom, you want to letter my book? And by the way, man, you lettered my very first job or whatever. And he went, yeah. So as many pages and as many scripts as I've written with Spawn, the person who's done more pages than anybody else on Spawn is Tom Orzechowski, because he has literally touched every page of that book since its inception in 1992. So at some point we'll have one. But doing that book, let me tell you, that book only lasted, Coyote only lasted for 4 months, and then they canceled the book. And all of a sudden I was out of work, right? And so now all of a sudden I'm out of work and I'm going, oh man, I don't know if I'm going to get in. So I took those charts that you saw up there and I resent all my stuff to all those same people. Because I kept the chart. Here's who I sent it to, who responded. And even though they said no, the people who wrote back were very kind in their rejections. The people who didn't care just took your samples and threw it in the garbage and never responded. The people who took time to write always gave you constructive criticism. And in hindsight, they were right. I wasn't ready. So all those no's were actually accurate. Not like, oh, you showed them Todd. They were actually accurate. I wasn't good enough. But they kept telling me, you should prove this, and prove this, and prove this, and prove this. And I eventually got better to the point that I got the job in Coyote. Like 4 months later, they canceled the book for low sales. And all of a sudden, I'm like, oh man. And then these moments in life that you have no control over that just have to come your way. And it's just called dumb luck. And here's my dumb luck. And dumb luck sometimes, ladies and gentlemen, comes at the expense of somebody else's heartbreak. Right? So I go, oh my gosh, I want to stay in the comic books, I don't have a job anymore, and I send it off to everybody. Here's the one thing I was able to do different. Before, I was saying, hey, I'm an amateur, I'm trying to break in. But now, after 4 months, I didn't get really much better. In all honesty, the work wasn't any better than it was 4 months earlier. But I got to say in my letters, I work for Marvel Comics, I'm a professional, right? And that sentence puts you in a different pile. There's the people who want to break in, and then there's the pros. And I was essentially a pro, so I got into the short pile. I get a phone call from a guy named Roy Thomas, and Roy Thomas then says, hey Todd, I've got a book, Infinity Incorporated. I need somebody to take over. I need somebody to take over for 2 months. You want to do it? I was only doing 10 pages, right? I was getting paid, I was doing 10 pages, getting paid $60 a page. I thought I was a king. I was living like a king on $600. And he says, I've got a book, it's only 2 months, 25 pages, and I can only pay you $75. Woo! I was a king at 600, like what are you talking about? Once I got that job, I'm telling you, the first thing I did, I went out and bought a ring, and I bent my knee, and my wife and I got married, right? Because I finally had money to basically support my wife. So that was it. Why did he need, go back, why did he need somebody on that book? Because the person who had done all the issues prior to that died. A guy by the name of Don Newton, you should look him up, he was a brilliant artist. He was a guy, I collected a bunch of his stuff. Don Newton did some of the best anatomy I ever saw. And then I saw why, because all of a sudden I saw a picture of him, this dude was buff. He looked good. I mean, he literally looked like what he was drawing, right? And he was, I saw an article of him in Men's Magazine or one of these men's work, like he was, that's how good he was. He was in the Men's Magazine for muscle. But he was a health nut, as you can imagine, because he just worked out. And he decided that it would be healthy for him to drink unpasteurized milk. And so he drank unpasteurized milk, didn't know he had an allergic reaction to it. By the time they get him from the ambulance to the hospital, he's dead on arrival, right? Now, heartbreak for that family, left an opening for somebody else, right? And that happened to be me. And I still, to this day, I have to tell you, I wonder, what if he never drank that milk? Would I have ever gotten my foot back in? Or if I did, it would have been a completely different path. That's that sliding door thing that you just go, oh man, my real big break in comic books to get a monthly comic book came at the expense of Don not being here any longer. But I'll have control of it. All I get to do is go, I better make the most of it. So if you bought the first issue of Infinity Incorporated, it says, guest penciler Todd Mcfarlane. The very next issue says, penciler in residence, which meant you were going to be the permanent artist. Why? Because I was only supposed to take over for 2 issues, and somebody else was supposed to take over, and they decided not to do it. And so Roy phones me up after doing the first issue going, you want to just stay? Yeah, what are you talking about? What are you talking about? I want to get into this business. You got a gig for me. This is good money. I'm in. And that was the thing that cemented the piece of my career that said he could meet a deadline, right? And I've told people before, you don't have to really be that good. If you can meet a deadline in a deadline-driven business, you're gold. If you can draw like Michelangelo, but you're slow, you're no good or you're going to be a cover artist, right? That's it, right? They need pages on a monthly basis over and over and over and over and over. And if you can show them you can do that and you're mediocre, you can get a job. And if you can do that and you're good, whew, fine, they'll take that all day long. So Infinity Incorporated was the thing that showed everybody, the other editors, both at Marvel and DC, that guy, that new kid named Todd Mcfarlane could do deadlines. But I went, no, I gotta go see if there's anybody else that likes me other than Roy Thomas. So I went over to Marvel, because that's how it worked. If you were at Marvel, you went to DC. If you were at DC, you went over to Marvel. You just sort of zigzag back and forth for the most part. And I went over there, and they said, I remember talking to one editor, and they said, okay, we'll give you a job. It wasn't Hulk at that point. We'll give you a job, we'll do a test, but you can't do what they call, you can't do the giant dice style that you have. And the reason was, because I had this funky style on Infinity Incorporated, because I knew my drawing wasn't very good, but I was going to college for a graphic design degree, and so I put all this graphic design stuff. In one of the pages, I did a big giant dice, and then I put panels in it. And I guess the editor must have looked at that book, because they went, we're going to give you this story, and we need you to basically do standard storytelling. You can't do that giant dice style, Todd. And I'm like, whatever, like, I'm good. And let me tell you, ladies and gentlemen, what they were asking me to do was basically say, Todd, we need you to run at half speed. Because the designing and the being creative with the pages took a lot more work to figure it out. And taking the page and cutting it into 6 panels and then drawing within this bland layout, that was easy, right? So, but because I also knew it was a deadline one, they said, we'll give you this job, it was called Spitfire. Sadly, though, Todd, you only have 12 days to do it. You normally have 30 days, so it's a month. You only have 12 days to do this story. Okay, I'll take it. I delivered it to them in 8 days. Now, was it good? Of course it wasn't. But it was 4 days earlier on an impossible deadline to begin with. So that was it. Brownie point scored again. So at this point, they're not worried that they got plenty of guys who can draw good. They're going, we've got books that got to come out. He can meet a deadline, and then a crunch, he can do it in 8 days. Phew. Like, so I'm getting value on the books by basically just showing them I can do it. Then all of a sudden my big break, right? Here's my big break right here at Marvel, because I did a few years of Infinity Incorporated. It was really when I got onto Incredible Hulk that to my mom and dad I had made it. Why? Because it was something they had heard, right? They're like, oh man, you've really made it. No, I've been making it for the last 3 years, Mom and Dad. You just don't know those characters. But they were able to then go to the neighbors and go, my son draws the Hulk, you know, that TV show thing, right? And so to them, it was like, they're like, oh, and the neighbors knew who the Hulk was, right? So like, oh man, your son must be good, right? So again, it's always weird that the promotion that you get is like with characters, it was never cash. It was always characters that they would promote you on. I jump on the Hulk. I bet you, I'd have to look, but I don't know how many issues I did of it, but I swear it seemed like I got a different inker every issue, right? It was, and so the one thing that was happening in my career at this point was that I was getting different inkers all the time, and everybody. And I had created this newer style because I was like a big fan of like the X-Men with John Byrne and Terry Austin who was inking it. And I called it my sort of dot dash style. And it was sort of this new modern look that sort of was simulating what Terry Austin was doing on the X-Men. And And they were giving me what like classic brush inkers. And it's like, I never thought that it's sort of mesh, but what are you gonna do? You just going along for the ride and they're giving it to you. But I was also getting faster. Remember I said I could do a book in 8 days? I was getting faster, 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 faster. And I got to the point where I could do 2 books. I could do 2 books. And so, very few people could get to that point. But I just go, I can do 2 books. So I was looking for a second book. So I ended up doing The Hulk, and then the editor of The Hulk, a guy named Bob Harris, said, hey, we got an opening on G.I. Joe. You want to jump on G.I. Joe? I'm like, yeah, sure, G.I. Joe, that book's selling. Now, let me just tell you sort of a weird thing about G.I. Joe. I'm Canadian, right? So I was living in Vancouver, British Columbia, and I was acutely aware that as I was living in Canada, I was drawing a book whose title was G.I. Joe, A Real American Hero. I hope they don't invent a thing called the internet, because this is going to all get blown up. Right? So I was drawing it, I drew 1 month of it. Larry Hama was the writer, him and I were basically oil and vinegar. We didn't see the world the exact same way, right? So I'm sure you should get his perspective on it, whatever. So we just clashed and clashed and clashed, and then I remember I was sitting, again, there are moments that are burnt in all of our lives that you just have clarity. I'm sitting at my table and I'm drawing and the phone rings and they said, Todd, we gotta fire you off G.I. Joe. It's just not gonna work. And I'm like, on some level, I was kind of relieved because it was such a fight, that first issue, that it was like, yeah, okay, fine. It was like a bit of a bummer, but like, okay. So again, I'd never been fired, and you're getting fired. And I remember, oddly, that I looked at the clock, because it was like, well, this is new, I'm fired. And I looked, it was 12:07, right? And I was like, oh man, okay, well, whatever. At 12:14, 7 minutes later, ring, phone rings. Somebody on the other end from DC Comics said, Dick Giordano. He said, Todd, remember when you were doing Infinity Incorporated and you left? Remember you said, the last thing you said to me? Yeah, I'll come back, but only for Batman. Right? I went, yeah. Alan Davis, we got this book, Batman Year 2. Remember Frank Miller did Batman Year 1, right? Woo! And The Dark Knight, woo! Yep. And then we're doing Batman Year 2, and Alan Davis, who did the first issue, isn't doing the rest. To this day, I don't know why, but we got an opening, you want to finish Batman Year 2. So I was unemployed for 7 minutes. And I went from G.I. Joe that was like pulling hair to drawing Batman. And I'm like, oh, man, Joe, he's like, do you think you have time in your schedule? I'm like, let me check. By coincidence, I didn't tell him I just got fired because he might not have given me the job. But I got to do Batman for the first time, right? And I'm like, oh, cool. Get to have some fun in doing it. Now, the third issue I did, which was part 4 of 4, I sort of hit this other moment where I got my samples and the inker on the book who had done some other stuff on me, whatever, I just couldn't take it anymore. These sort of old school way of inking, this new, I couldn't do it anymore. So I usually don't ever do this, and I hate myself, but I just go, I can't. So I phoned up the editor, Denny O'Neill, and I go, Denny, Todd. He goes, hey Todd, how you doing? I go, good. I just got to say something, I hate it, but I'm going to say it. I have to ink this last issue. I have never inked. I don't know how to ink. I don't even know what that means, but I take this anymore. And unfortunately, Denny had already been put in a lurch by Alan Davis quitting, right? And so Alan Davis quit, and he goes, oh man, I'm going to have another guy quit, I'm going to have 3 artists on 4 books. And so he sort of had his back up against the wall, so he had no choice but to say yes, right? And so the 4th part is the first book I ever inked. And then at that point, and it was terrible. I didn't even know what the tools were. The tool I used, I never used it ever again. But what ended up happening was, because I inked that, I was able to go back to the Hulk and go to Bob Harris and say, well, they're letting me ink. Why can't I ink the Hulk? Yeah, okay, you can ink the Hulk. And again, it wasn't very good either, but now I'm doing 2 books, cool, and I'm inking. I'm like, oh yeah, okay, so again, you sort of elevate up a little bit, but Batman Year 2 goes away, because there's only 3 issues, and now I'm fast enough to do 2 books, I gotta pick up another book. And then that was the one where everybody, all the other editors were coming up to me saying, oh Todd, you're looking for another book? Yeah, cool, okay, cool, we got this book, and this book, but whatever you do, don't go into the Spider-Man office. It's a shambles, it's a shambles, right? And so, I just went, Spider-Man office, now let me just tell you my personality, right? And my mom and dad will back this up in a lot of principles that I dealt with, right? You don't ever tell me I can't do something, right? So, this is again, when you're a kid and your dad says, okay, you got a curfew, come home at 11, it was always 11:08, right? Never 11. I just wanted to see how far I could push mom and dad before they actually got mad. And I go, if they didn't get mad at 11:08, next time it was 11:15, right? You just keep going till you get cuffed, right? And then you go, oh, that's the time I got to be home. So they said, don't go into Spider-Man office. I did. Right? So I'm like, phew, how bad can it be? And I went there, and it was in flux. The artists were sort of coming and going, and the sales were down. I think Amazing Spider-Man was at number 21 at that point in their sales. 21, can you imagine Spider-Man being the 21st best-selling book at that point? And they basically said out loud, just like, hey, we're looking for people to come on board and stay on it and do whatever. We got to get sales up, do whatever, right? Now remember the piece that I took was do whatever, right? I glommed onto that. Now, some of the stuff you see here, the drawing that is, go back. The drawing that's at the top left, I did that when I was 16. That's the first Spider-Man I ever drew. That's my 16-year-old Spider-Man. A couple years later, I started training myself to be a little bit better. The one next to it is, okay, here's Spider-Man. I'm still not a pro. This is when I'm sending off all my samples. And then the one down below is just me doing some sketching, and I'm getting a little bit better. And then, obviously, the one on the right is a professional piece. Right? So again, I just show that sometimes, and I've done it in books to say, hey, that's where you can be at when you first begin, but eventually if somebody pays you, you'll get better, and then eventually you're like learning a language. I think art is like learning a language. The more you do it, the more fluent you're going to get at it. It's that easy. The only reason I'm maybe a better artist than most of you in this room is because I've just done it 1,000 times more than you. And if you had done it 1,000 times, you might be better, right? I just have been paid to do it over and over and over and over. So I went into the office and they said, hey, you want to do a Spider-Man book? And I'm like, yeah, I got an opening. I just dropped Batman. And I thought I was going to get one of the lower books, but they gave me Amazing Spider-Man. And I went, dude, give me like Amazing Spider-Man. To me, that was like the granddaddy book. I'm like, oh, wow, cool. Except, why is he in that black costume? Right? Like, he was in a black costume. Like, I don't understand what this is about. Now, I was aware of Secret Wars, but I'm like, and this was like, come on, I don't want to draw that, right? So I want to draw Spider-Man. Spider-Man's red and blue. He's red and blue. Come on. I get to finally draw Spider-Man, and he's black. That's like doing Batman and polka dots. Like, he's not Batman. I want to draw Spider-Man. And so we have this conversation. He goes, okay, if you come on, they really like that costume though, Todd. Like, the people upstairs like the black costume, and it's sort of doing whatever. I'm like, well, what if we just take that black costume off him, and I'll just show you a drawing, or we'll just come up with something, and that drawing becomes this character you guys now know as Venom. Right? So, no, I didn't know what we were doing at that point. You guys talking about, well, shit, if it was that easy and I knew how to do it, I'd have 100 Venoms in my portfolio. So I go, we gotta get it off, so we did it. So I did the drawing, I sent it to them, they approved it. They sent it upstairs, they approved it, and then David Mcfarlane, who came on to write, then sent me the first plot, and then information I could have used earlier, he says it's Eddie Brock. And I'm like, pardon? Eddie Brock's human. Have you seen my drawing? Right? And it's approved. If I would have known it was Eddie Brock, I would have designed him differently. I probably would have made him with spikes or something, but I would have made him sort of more like a human. But I just thought, oh, it's an alien costume. He should look like an alien. He should look like a monster. Let's go. But then I go, no, I'm not going to redesign him, because if Bruce Banner can turn into the Hulk, then damn it, Eddie Brock can turn into Venom. So screw it. Let's just stay with it, right? And David and I had no idea what we were about to unleash. It was just a character. And so for any of you that have like the Amazing Spider-Man 300 issue, you paid a lot of money for it and you got to grade it and whatever else, right? It's kind of expensive for a couple of reasons. It's an anniversary book, 300. It's early in my career, but really one of the big things that drives it, they call it the origin of Venom, right? And this is like the first whole story of Venom, the origins of Venom. I don't call it that issue 300, the origin of Venom. I call it, finally, we get the damn black costume on Peter Parker issue. Because the last page of Spider-Man, Amazing Spider-Man 300 is one, to me, I thought I drew Spider-Man for the very first time. And although I sold a bunch of pages over the years, and I wish I had a bunch of them back, I still have that last page. Of that last page of Spider-Man 300, where he jumps out and says, a new beginning, woo! And I came out and I'm like, man, I'm finally, in my mind, I'm finally artistically drawing Spider-Man. We had to create this thing called, what's his name? Venom? Oh yeah, cool, right? He was an afterthought. He was what is affectionately known in business as a happy accident. And for Sony, $1 billion happy accident. It worked out good for them, right? So we were on. But as you can see, like in 298, I sort of did the spider webs and whatever else. And remember what I said in the beginning, when I came on the book. What did they say? Do whatever you got to do to get the sales up. And I took that seriously, right? And so I went, oh, I guess we've got to try some new things. And so one of the things that we did, amongst others, I gave him big eyes, I gave him all those cool, funky poses. I just want to have fun. Let me tell you, being an artist is a very lonely occupation. It's like being a novelist. You lock yourself in a room, for the most part, for 10 or 12 hours a day. And you're by yourself in your thoughts. Here's what you need to do, entertain yourself. So I was just drawing stuff to entertain myself. So it was like, man, what would be cool? Right? Oh, if I put him in this pose, and if he does this, and he does that. I mean, I don't know if you guys remember, I did stupid stuff, like he's hanging upside down, waiting, like he's doing a stakeout or something like that for some criminal. And he went to the donut place, and he had a donut on each finger. You guys remember this shot? Because I thought, like, if he can crawl walls, isn't his fingers sticky? So if they're all sticky, he can go in and go, oh, I got 5 donuts. And then you're just like, which one am I going to eat right now, right? So this is how I was just trying to entertain myself to get through all the pages, because every page isn't like cool stuff with the good guy and the bad guy and sort of doing their thing. So I just was adding these pieces. It's just that it sort of ruffled the feather of the status quo. Now let me also tell you, I have learned a couple things in my life. I'm in my early 60s now. The great enemy for you young people, the great enemy that you will meet in your life is status quo. People hanging on, corporations, workers, bosses hanging on to yesterday. What happened yesterday? I can't control it and it's gone. What I can worry about is right this moment and tomorrow. My best day is always now or tomorrow. And yesterday is gone. And to hold on to that, you're never going to evolve. And what's strange about status quo, ladies and gentlemen, is that there's only two constants. There's only two constants in life. Death, it's going to come and get all of us, and change. It's been happening since the dawn of man. Otherwise, we'd still be in caves. We've been changing, and yet we fight change. It is crazy. It is crazy how much we just go, this is how we've always done it. And the people that have made waves are the people who go, well, what about trying another way, right? Another way. So they took it that me changing Spider-Man, especially the webs, was because somehow I was insulting them. And I was like, what? My job is to sell comic books. You hired me to sell comic books. And at that point, by the time I quit Spider-Man, I was selling more comic books than anybody they employed. And yet, every time I came in, I'm telling you, I told the story, they just wagged their finger at me, go, you can't draw him like that, you can't draw him like that, you can't draw him like that. And I'm like, why? And it's like, well, it's got to look this certain way. Why? Why? What's the goal? The goal is to sell comic books. You're in a comic book selling business. I sell more comic books than anybody you employ. Why am I the guy we're having a conversation with? Why don't you talk to everybody other than me? Because they're behind me in this race. And eventually, they just wore me out, ladies and gentlemen. And again, different personalities, all of you here. Some of you might have lasted 20 years, some of you might have lasted 20 days. I just got to the end of my rope, so I had to quit. And the reason I quit, if you go to the last issue, was because of this page. This was literally the proverbial camel that broke, the straw that broke the camel's back. Spider-Man's fighting against Juggernaut, and I'm like, can't be Juggernaut, he's unstoppable. Except for he's got this little slit opening for his eye, so there's only one opening that you have. Take him in the eye. And I put that drawing. The reason that we have that drawing, I still have that page as is framed. I kept that page because that was the one that got me away from Marvel. This is what's in your comic book, right? They ended up, they pulled it out, I gave them a splatter effect, whatever, I had some silly conversation, and when they were there over the phone saying, hey Todd, we got to do this and this and this and this, I just want, okay guys, I'm going to do a couple of drawings, you guys fix it any way you want, I'm about to have my first child, I'm done, I'm done, you've baked me, right? I just can't do this over and over, that it's just never good enough for you. So I quit, and we ended up, Rob Liefeld and Eric Larson, we've been talking together for years, and we were all talking about doing our own comic book, and then we just asked a simple question, well, why don't we do them together? Why are we doing, like, everybody's been doing comic books individually for 40 years, why don't we do a strength in numbers? And then Rob said, hey, what about Jim Valentino? He does some stuff. I'm like, again, the more the merrier. We got 3 of us, there's 4 of us. So I got on a plane, and Rob got on the plane and went to New York to basically tell Marvel we were quitting. And we had 24 hours, so we landed, and the next morning at 8 o'clock we had a meeting to tell them we were quitting. And in that, and here's those breaks, those lucky breaks, in that moment between landing and waiting for the meeting the next morning, I ran into Jim Lee. He happened to be at a convention, or at an auction in New York at the same time. I had no idea. And I have the gift of gab, and I'm a good salesman, and I gave him the pitch. He goes, what are you doing here? Well, let me tell you what we're doing. And Jim comes back later and goes, I'm in. And then he goes, how about Will Spataccio? Can he join? Shoot, right? Like, what are you talking about? So we went from 4, 5, 6, and then I'm going back to the hotel, and at the hotel I happen to stay at, again, didn't know it, I run into Mark Silvestri in the lobby, and Mark's there, and he goes, Todd, what are you doing here? It's about 10, 11 o'clock at night, and I go, you got 10 minutes? And I gave him the sales pitch with the closing, you have to give me your answer by 7:30 in the morning, because we're going to a meeting, and I need to know whether you're in or out. And he was like, I gotta tell you whether I'm changing my career, like tonight? Yeah, yes. And luckily I got the phone call in my room, and he said, I'm in. And so we went into that meeting, and Jim Lee said, I'll come with you. Rob, myself, my wife, and Jim Lee went in, and we broke the news to him. After that, we went over to DC, we broke the news to them. They thought they got all of us, because remember I said earlier, you go back and forth? They thought they hit the mother load. And we just said, no, we've come here to tell you we're not working for you. Which they took as a bit of an insult, because they go, well, why would you come here to say you're not working for it? Especially because Jim Lee has never stepped foot in our office at this point. And he was doing the X-Men that was selling more than any comic book. He was the golden boy. And they were like, we're going to get Rob and Todd and Jim. Like, you should have seen their eyes, ladies and gentlemen. There were 20 of them. Like, when we walked in, there were 20 of them organized. We said, come into the room. And they were like, the mother load. We have hit the mother load of all these guys here. And we said, we're not working for it. And one of the reasons why they go, Todd, that doesn't make any sense. Why would you come here? And again, I just go, my question to them was simple. And I'm way more militant than my other partner. But I just go, you know how, they go, we just came up with a new contract. It's good for the freelancers. It's good for the freelancers. It's good for your life. Why are we the bad guys? And I'm like, no. I'm sure you guys did a good job. Just a simple little one question. You know when you did that contract that was going to make the freelancers' life better, did you find one freelancer what would make their life better? And there was silence in the room. They couldn't even bother to ask any of us in our community what we would need to be better taken care of. They just always knew without asking. And that was the insult to me. Of like, you couldn't even take one of us. Not me, not Jim, any of them. There's thousands of us in this industry. You couldn't bother to talk to one of us, right? Like, we can't do this anymore. So, we went and started Image Comic Book. This is the picture. That picture before the very first meeting we ever had. And then some of these here, some fun ones here. Left is the day that Spawn #1 came out. And I don't know to this day, my wife and I don't understand, like, we were living in Portland and the signing was at Golden Apple in the Los Angeles area, and I had our baby, right? Like my wife was teaching, so I don't know if she just went, I gotta go to work. I don't know where you're going, but you're taking care of Cyan, right? I'm going for my signing in LA. I guess she's coming with me. So she was with me the whole time, right? You see her in the page next. Right? Because a bunch of people came. There's Jim Lee, there's Rob, a couple of people from Hollywood, and I'm holding the baby again in Cyan. I'm like, okay, I guess I'm doing my biggest signing ever in my life, holding the baby in one arm and signing with the other one. And then every now and then pawning the baby off, my daughter Cyan off to somebody else. But if you go to the next couple of pages here, we'll go quick here, we've only got a couple minutes. The great pleasure that we had, and part of Image is that we all had to come up to our own book, right? The drawing on the left is the drawing I did when I was 16. Because I did a comic book called Spawn when I was 16. I'm like, oh yeah, I'm gonna do my own comic book, right? And if you look at the logo, see how I got the skull and the A, right? And I kept it. When I gave it to Tom Warzikowski, and I said, hey, but as you can see, the drawing that I did and the look of him wasn't much different. He had the cowl. He's got the gloves, and I mean, there were some changes I made. I added the chains and the spikes and whatever else, but he sort of kind of was about the same. I mean, it's still kind of a simplistic design, but one of the great pleasures of jumping into a comic book and having a good life, and you guys have helped give it to me, is that I was able to take this character that I'd had for a while, pull him out, and now not only Spawn #1 come out, but you know, if you go down the line here, I think it's Spawn 100, 150, whatever, 200, whatever. We go all the way till we get to recently issued 300 that sets, well, it's actually 301. 301 ends up setting the record for the longest creator-owned book by any human being on the planet since the dawn of man. But I put on the back of that book and people go, oh, Todd, you're so lucky. Man, look at you. You've caught a couple of lucky breaks. I want to go too. Let me tell you how long it takes to get that record, right? And you can see it there, right? Literally, thousands of pages, dozens of creators, decades, 3 decades. I had to put in 30 years, ladies and gentlemen, to get that record. It wasn't like I just put in a couple of weeks. It was 30 years plus to get that record. And then the picture on the other side is a bunch of us where we got the Guinness Book of World Record, a bunch of the people that were the creative people that were there. So one of the great gifts of being in this industry, I've had two. Let me just add, I've had two great gifts. The biggest one are you, good people. Without you people supporting what I've done for a living, I don't have a career, right? And maybe it's just my Canadian, like my wife and I never, ever take that for granted, ever. So when I did an interview, they go, how come you don't charge for your autograph at the convention? Because I've got enough money. You've given me plenty. I don't need to take more of your cash. right? If anything, I should be doing more shows and signing for free to say thank you as much as I can. You guys have afforded me and my family a grand life. And if I can do small things in return, that's the least I can do for you. So thank you for giving me a life that has been amazing. The second piece of it, the other gift, is being able to run into some of your fellow peers and not only be calling them friends, but basically being able to call them, some of them, dear friends. So I think we've got a couple of them, some pictures here that, if we keep going, there we go. One of my dearest friends. So this photo, I actually still have that shirt. This photo, I was going to have on my work tomorrow. This photo was taken when Stan Lee received his Walk of Fame star. He's the only person in the comic book industry ever to get the star. And at this point in my life, he was Batman, I wasn't even Robin, but let's just call me Robin. I was the guy that would bring Stan up to get all of his awards, right? For some reason, I did it one time for him, and he was so grateful, right? It was like, I think Paramount gave him his own private Iron Man premiere, and somebody asked me to be the MC. I did it. At the end, Stan was like, "Oh man, Todd, thank you." And I'm like, "Oh, thanks, Stan, for having me. It was cool." And then the next day, we were in Vegas. The next day, he came up to me and he was like, "Todd!" And I'm like, "Yeah." "Oh man, I just want to say you did a great job last night." And I went, No, Stan, you already said that last night. He goes, "No, I'm deaf. I didn't hear a damn word you said last night." So I just nod and I say nice things, but then they record it, and then I go to my room, and then I play it back with the volume all up, and then I got to finally hear what you said. You were amazing. I got to do dozens of shows. How would you like to come along and do all my panels with me? And it was like a great offer, ladies and gentlemen. But I have a life, Stan, right? So it's like, I'll try and do as much as I can. Again, even given that, like, I got my own life. I would be hard pressed. I'd like anybody to stand up there and say they've been on stage more times with Stan Lee than I have. I've had the great honor of being on stage more times with Stan Lee than any other human being. This photo is a big deal to me, right? This was at Ace Comic-Con in Phoenix. Stan is 93 years old. I remember as he's walking up, he says to me, and it was heartbreaking, he says to me, "Todd, you do most of the talking. I don't want to be here." I'd never heard, this man was nothing but enthusiastic up to that point. What I used to do at the end of each one of our panels, we used to take selfies. Stan didn't know what a selfie was. To this day, he never doesn't know what a selfie was. But we took the selfie. This is the last moment Stan Lee was ever on a stage. This photo. And I'm like, oh, if we only knew. Because some people are starting to leave now. If we knew this was going to be the last time that human being was going to be up on a stage in public, we would have given him a way grander send-off. Let me tell you, right? So, but it's like, so every time I look at that, I go, man, that's it. That's the last time he spoke to the public. And it just happened to be in my backyard in Phoenix. The next one, I think there's a photo, it's the actual selfie, right? Because he never knew what the selfie was. So every time I said, let's take a selfie, he's like, what is that? He never knew. His eyesight was bad. So the first one is way more romantic than the actual photo, but I've got tons of these selfies. Let me just tell you, Stan, what's going on? I got his nose, I got his nostril, and whatever else. We got to have some good time. So if we go through the rest of it, then all of that with the Spawn then leads to like animation, that leads to movies, that leads to people coming up to you. I started doing, we expanded the Spawn universe, but then people started saying, hey, it led to the toys. You want to make our toys? I started doing the toys with Kiss. We did the movie. Hey, Todd, you want to start directing some music videos? There's corn up in the corner there. We ended up winning Grammy. I can't read a lick of music. I got a Grammy award, right? There's always a back door, ladies and gentlemen. You just figure it out. You just go, what? My wife is an accomplished pianist, and she didn't have nothing. I recently did the thing with Ozzy Osbourne's latest one. Last couple here real quick. Click. Oh no, where's the photo? That's the last photo? No, hit the photos, they're here. We got a couple more photos. Let's finish it. What are you gonna do, cut it out?
There we go.
Some of my great peers, right? This is where we met Stan right there. We did the music video with Eddie Vedder. If we had more time, I tell you this is the day I almost killed Eddie Vedder. and Eddie Vedder, at some point, I wish I had, he smoked, it was 100 degrees, he wanted to play catch, he brought baseball gloves or whatever else, and it was 105 in LA that day, and I'm from Phoenix and I'm like a cockroach, it don't matter to me, and Eddie is in leather, and he's got it smoking, and by about 20 throws, and he was like, Eddie, you should slow down. No, we don't quit. Come on, we go. And I thought Eddie was going to die right there on the spot, going, oh man, I'm the guy that killed Eddie. So, and then you get to have fun, right? When we started Image, there was a lot of jealous people, and so I had this big debate with Peter David one time in Phoenix, or in Philadelphia, and they wanted to take it serious, the debate. And I go, what are you talking about? I came up there in my Rocky outfit, and I had all these change of costumes and whatever else. And I remember they turned and they said, if you do anything other than follow the national debate rules, we will shut this down right now. And I remember there was a bunch of people in the audience just like here, and I could see blood in their eyes because people were jealous that Image was going because it was just a bunch of those snotty artists and they were making too much money, and it's like, this is ridiculous. And I could see they just wanted a bloodbath. And I'm like, man, they've lost their sense of humor of just being able to sort of laugh at ourselves. So that's what that was. And that's sort of it. Well, let me say, I didn't know that, like I said, that I would be in Hollywood, I'd be in video games, I'd be on TV, we'd be doing any sort of silly stuff because I wanted to pencil comic books when I was 16, and that was it. So my message to all of you is simply this. You never know what the end of the road is until you step foot on the road to begin with. So stop doubting yourself, right? Because you just have to take the first step, and you don't know where it's gonna go. I had no idea. Talked to the 16-year-old Todd and the 23-year-old Todd when I first broke in and said, here's all the things that will happen in your life, and I would have laughed at you at that point. And yet, here we are, and they're all true, right? And so, I encourage my other wish is if there's somebody in this stage that 5 years from now, 3 years from now, 10 years from now, you're the one that is on this stage giving the talk, right? You be the next inspiration, you be the next opportunity, you be the next possibility. That's all I see myself as, is that there are other possibilities other than Marvel and DC. There are other possibilities other than Hasbro and Mattel if you want to buy toys. There are other possibilities, there's other routes in life. You don't have to always go down the path that is most traveled. I always go in the other direction because I know it's most of the time, but if you succeed, it's spectacular, right? And people will basically write books about you and say kind things and do all of those. So thank you from the bottom of my heart, for my family, for basically